government, and they have been successful in deceiving the people into thinking that they are legitimate when they are de facto. And also relative to the fact that many people among our own who know that these people and the entity and the subdivisional states of municipalities, etc., constructed under them are in fact de facto. And rather than tell the people the truth, they've been playing these emotional process games with the people so that they can get into their pockets, and are indeed not trying to solve anything. They're just simply continuing the exploitation revenue stream created by the injuries caused by the occupational forces under de facto government, under the guise of helping our people in the so-called conscious community, which is misused statement, and also infiltrating themselves into the Moorish Divine and National Movement under the guise of supporting the principles laid before us by our illustrious Prophet Noble Ali, and the positive aspects of principled constitutional enforcement as presented by the Holy and Divine Prophet to the Moors of the Northwest, who have been subjugated under hybrid European colonial operations, particularly the bulls of the Catholic Church, being Dum Diversas, Romanus Pontifex, Unum Sanctum, etc., Sister QV Act of 1666, etc., which would include all operations of the ens legis straw man concepts of human trafficking, etc., of exploitation of children, of sacrificial hierarchy, murdering of children under the guise of women's rights, also called abortion, also related to what is known as the Roe versus Wade operations under this disguise of helping women when really it's part of the genocide operations, and also part of the food chain fed back to the people, etc., with the carcasses after they have been discarded and organs, etc., and blood has been removed from them, and things of that nature. And that's a fact. It's an uncomfortable fact, but it is the reality. And I feel that many people, because these subject matters are sensitive, uncomfortable realities of the operations here at Midgard, they don't want to get into that. They'd rather dance our people through processes and sell them instruments in the name of regaining or taking semblance of holder in due course relative to their lost estate under the Sister QV Act, etc., and deluding to becoming the executor of their lost estate that has been essentially placed out of their venue, out of their control, in the hands of persons who have been claiming to be government who are not. And with the knowledge that the members of the Circle Church and Chancery, located in England, etc., who you know as the Sadducees and Pharisees, better known as attorneys, esquires, and lawyers, etc., with their allegiance to the Pope of Rome under the Spanish Inquisition against the Moors, etc., have been exploiting our people for the last few hundred years. And in fact, the network of their operations actually goes back more than 1,000 years. That's a fact. And much of the injuries that they have caused against humanity, they have done in other people's names. This is one of the tricks of masking, or what you call projection, that they have used strategically for years, for hundreds of years. I, as an example, present to you a paradox that you may have heard of in some of the John D. Rockefeller and Frederick T. Gates operations of human humans being trained under animal husbandry, known as the General Education Board, with helpers from among our own who have received their royalties from being so-called teachers of the Board of Education, who have been also parasitic promoters of the paradigms of human molding under the philosophies of John D. Rockefeller and Frederick T. Gates, to make our people docile, thinking that they were actually being made erudite in human endeavors when they're actually being trained under chattel operations of animal husbandry. And so usually the hybrid occupational owners of the United States Corporation Company and its subdivisional franchisee states of corporate entities and their municipalities, which are corporate entities. They're not legitimate government. This must be comprehended, understood, around about known, etc., and you must be cognizant of. And they are using or operating in the name of sovereign powers that are not actually vested in them. And so one of the things that I wanted to share with you all tonight is some of the principles of established law coming from the fundamental institutes of American law. And what I want you to take note of is this, and I want you all to take notes. Please do take notes. Now, while this is in its nature an extensive study, I'm going to share with you some fundamental principles by which you can vet people who are involved in your life in the name of law, in the name of helping, quote unquote, the community, etc., and in the name of acknowledging your nationality, etc., so that you can vet both them, who many of them are actually what you would call controlled operatives, who have what you might call helpers in the background that you don't see, who are set among you to exploit or to continue the exploitation of our people. And most of them are very intelligent, well-spoken, well, as you might call, educated. However, one of the reasons I'm sharing this with you, because I've experienced over the years, and I know some of you who are becoming conscious have been exploited by these people, whereas instead of telling you the truth of the fundamentals, so that we all can start coming together using our divine mind and common sense, which harmonizes with what is known as the common law, they would prefer to dance you through processes that are actually supportive of the federal rules of civil procedures, things like this, which was set up by members of the Curia and Bar for the purpose, for the absolute purpose of retarding and denying due process, denying justice, but giving the feigned or the false appearance of maintaining or producing or executing or ruling in cases of controversy, i.e., for the sake of justice or balance, all of which they are not, have not been, don't intend to, etc. And so I'm sharing with you some fundamental principles, and we can discuss some of them. And this is, I want to show some of this, and I've been sharing this with brothers and sisters who have been part of or involved with the Moors Order of the Round Table since 1982, to try to help them come into the proper state of mind in relationship to them making what you would call rebuttal writs and rights of claims relative to their unalienable rights and their birthrights, which are relative, which have been constantly abridged, abused, exploited, violated, trespassed against by people who have claimed to be quote unquote government officials, and others among our own who have been educated by them, who have associations with members of the Bar Association and members of the Board of Education, who are really in it to line their pockets and aren't really honorably having any real intentions of liberating our people. So I'm going to share with you some fundamental principles so that you can make discernments of your own and not be followers of myself or anyone else, but that you yourself know some of the fundamental principles so that you can make discernment and judgments for yourself and on your own sake. So I'm going to share with you some entries from the Superliminal, and then we're going to go into Institutes of American Law. And as you know, in some of our past conversations here at the House of Reawakening Minds, we dealt with the issue of capitis diminutio maxima, that controversy. And this is actually a continuation in that particular section of the Superliminal. And I felt it apropos to deal with it tonight because the timing is right on, particularly with the controversies that you see taking place across the land right now, with appearances of divisions, etc., etc. Now, what you have is agendas being exposed. And so what I want to do is share with you, some of you who are already aware, and many of you who are less aware, and particularly those who are less aware, so that you can start doing some things from the in relationship to issues of your right of estate, your right of claim, the right of your labor, your right not to be taxed by a foreign fraudulent platform entity operations of criminals who have been pretending to be government, who are actually warring against you, and to start protecting yourselves from people among ourselves who are secretly associated with them while pretending to be helping you, who are really there to continue the exploitation, even though they're getting a little less what you would call emoluments from the people than the hybrid Europeans. They are what you might say that those others are in the background, and most of them are who will put them among you under the guise of helping, so that you can discern who is who, what, and keep this in mind: will and intent. I repeat, will and intent. And so in relationship to fundamental elements of Al-Moroccan or American law, we're dealing with some essentials of law and sovereignty. And so I want to share with you just some of these things so that your concepts will be aligned with what we're sharing with you. And also, we want to show you, and the reason I'm showing you this also is because these people who are claiming to be government, and these people who claim to be so-called community educators and leaders are well aware of this information, but they will definitely, in general, not share this type with you because they don't want you liberated from the quote-unquote system, nor from them. So they all, because keep in mind, birthrights are not for sale. Unalienable rights are not for sale. Birthrights are distinguished from privileges. Unalienable rights are distinguished from privileges. Birthrights are distinguished from licenses. Unalienable rights are distinguished from licenses and privileges. Keep that in mind while I'm sharing this information with you, which means no lien can be put upon them. They are not to be applied for. They are to be reclaimed. And when you see people who claim to have authority or some position of authority become offended when they hear the word birthright, sovereignty, etc., you already know that they are enemies of humanity. And so I'm going to share some things with you preliminarily, and then we'll get into some of the principles of laws and government. Now, a reminder to us all is to be in the consciousness of the existence of the higher self and of the lower self. And many of you who have had the honor and the benefit of becoming involved or associated with the Moorish Divine and National Movement as set forth by Prophet Noble Drew Ali and others working with him during the year 1913 officially, although the operations was operative a few years before then. Those of you who have a foundation in some of the instructions presented to the Moors of Northwest by the Prophet are aware of the higher self and lower self. And this is one of the first things he reminded the Moors of the Northwest to remember and to know of your higher self and lower self. So keep this in mind as we are going through this treatise, and hopefully it will benefit all of us. So as a reminder for all of us is to be in the consciousness of the existence of the higher self and of the lower self. And the focus of the higher self, engages thoughts and actions related to that which is of the positive, that which is du jour, and with the fair, the just, the righteous, the balanced, the truth, and the love, etc. The lower self refers to the thoughts and to the actions which are de facto, that which deludes to selfishness, to usury, to parasitic narcissism, to unfair exploitation, and with injustice, with murder, with theft, with frauds, and with everything negative, and with thoughts that harm, etc. And we are sharing with you now some of the fundamental elements about land jurisdiction, air jurisdiction, and water jurisdiction relative to things and to aspects one needs to know about law and about sovereignty. And so law is essentially land, air, and water jurisdiction issues constructed on what you would call constitutional reasoning relative to the makeup of man, harmonic with the laws of nature and nature's God principle, so that it actually offends none, but recognizes and preserves the unalienable rights or birthrights of man as a species at Midgard Earth. Now, I want to present to you this. Some of these things we're going to be talking about is to present to you certain fundamental principles so that you can know for yourself that if you have not been experiencing what you would have been calling government from this perspective, you have been experiencing criminality. If you have not been experiencing these fundamental principles presented to you, which are in their essence de jure, you have been experiencing the opposite, which is de facto. So therefore, this would help you have a measure of truth from falsehood to distinguish the two. Fake government or de facto government distinguished from de jure, which would be the real. And I find it necessary because these people and their minions among us have been continuing their exploitation of our people. And due to the fact that the platforms that they have constructed for these last thousands of years or so are being dismantled with the energy of the Aquarian lights and the consciousness of the people coming into the higher planes of life, thus their thoughts are arising or ascending, and the pineal gland is becoming more active. This is the age of what you will call enlightenment or consciousness. That path of thinking is what we're on in general. Some are rising or ascending, some and some less so. And so we're sharing this information so that you can be more willing and knowingly willing to let go of some false concepts that may have been inculcated within your thought processes and in the paradigm of your existence, that you yourself must shed them. And it is not being shared with you to make you a follower of anyone, but to help liberate you in relationship to the cognizance of your relationship to government and its relationship to you. And so we will continue. So in this treatise, we review the subject matters involving American law and the laws of government. And in any controversy or law issues concerning diverse arguments or jurisdictions, etc., one must be made aware of the parties in the controversy. Keep that in mind. Always being aware of parties in the controversy. There's no such thing as a controversy existing that needs adjudication or needs to be brought before a court or needs to be brought before the public view relative to a process of what you call the thought processes of the people, or of a competent or incompetent political venue platform known as a court, etc. So in this controversy, issues concerning diverse arguments or jurisdiction, one must be made aware of the parties in the controversy, the matters of the claims, the competency of the jurisdiction presented, the veracity or lack thereof concerning venue, and the conditional capacities of those who decide or rule in the resolutions of the case or issues at hand, etc. And trusting that the limited presentments shared tonight, at least, will assist one in one's capacity to discern in vetting those who claim authority in matters of persons, in matters of subjects, in matters of territorial jurisdictions, etc. And so let us be clear on the issues of diverse controversy concerning America, Americans, and law and sovereignty. First, who are the Americans? Americans are the aboriginal and indigenous natural peoples of the lands located geographically at the western degrees of the aggregate organic lands on Midgard Earth. The Americans are dark olive, copper, and melanin complexion natural peoples distinguished from Xanthus or Occidental peoples. The true anthropological histories demonstrate that the Americans are descendants of the ancient Canaanite, Moabite, Asiatic, African peoples. And they are the direct descendants of the ancient peoples generally referred to as Phoenicians, Moors, Almorocans, Mu, and related Asiatic African peoples. In the matter of sovereignty, we are referring to the natural divine state of man and woman as existing in physical dimension, descended from the natural womb of mother, womb man, being a gateway from the divine source, commonly and loosely referred to as God, the creator, etc. In the matters of civilization and organized government, sovereignty is vested in the people and is conditionally extended by reasonable and consented agreement to a monarch or representative governing body of men and or women whose political existence is predicated on the service of preserving, of securing, of upholding, and of protecting the pre-existing natural and unalienable rights of the governed. They have no other purpose of political construct. and thus the rightful or de jure government of the said people may be referred to as sovereign. A vital point of our present conversation is to to know that many people or persons who have claimed to be, quote unquote, the sovereign power or authority over you, over your rights, or over your property or labor, etc., are usually lying or criminal de facto in intent and in actions, as distinguished from those beings or entities possessing true or de jure delegated authorities. Discernment in the law and sovereignty matters is a focal point. And so shielding or shedding parasitic peoples from your energy field is indeed a part of the intent of this treatise. Be cognate and be aware. Nativity and nationality cognate thinking is the order of the day. Now, let us share with you some liberating and knowledgeable principles about American law and the laws of government. And so now we're going to go into some of these fundamentals that I will share with you, that I've been sharing with people for about 40 years, etc. And this particular, I want to present to you to know that people who claim to be government, who claim to have authority over you, who have been taxing you wrongfully, and who have been executing powers over your property, over your bodies, over your labors, etc. If what you have been experiencing is contrary to what I'm about to read to you, know that you've been dealing with criminals and frauds. That's the beginning of many of you to be on your path of social, political, and economic liberation, sometimes referred to as self-determination. Isn't that term being used lightly and wrongly by many who don't teach these things? And you'll also recognize why they don't teach civics. Now, I'm going to give you some categories that are being presented here. However, we will not go over all of them. We will go over some of them points for points that will give you something to mull over, to think about, to conceptually recognize that you have not been exposed to this, although they've been telling you that they are your government. Pardon me. You'll be dealing with laws in general. Laws in general, justice, laws, law of nature, law of nations, municipal law, sovereignty, what is sovereignty, by whom sovereignty is exercised, division of the powers of sovereignty, what is a constitution, and different forms of government as an example. And so what I'm going to read to you, just to get you primed in relationship to what the intent of the matter that we're presenting to you for your liberation purposes, and for you to start taking more responsibility in your lives, presenting to you, and this is in the enumerated form, say points from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. And I think that should be sufficient for the night, since we can't go any further, but it will be enough, I think, for you to get the concepts or ideas of what we're sharing with you tonight here at the House of Reawakening Minds, which is being moderated by Dr. Naila Gilliam, and I'm sure that many of you have shared with her, also have walked with her in the official office hours of Dr. G for quite some time. And I think this will be helpful for us all in the constant communications and questions that arise from the people who have been sharing these nights and these evenings with us. This is to help you along the way, also to help you formulate your questions more intelligently relative to substance as opposed to emotionalism, which has been, for the most time, with many of us, a waste of time and actually dragging, or what you call retarding. So we want to counter that kind of mentality, those kind of activities, by giving you factual information. So here we go. Institutes of American Law, Preliminary Book of Laws and Government. And I'm going to go from chapter 1, and I'm going to deal from, say, 1 to 10 points. Keep in mind, take notes. And many of you who have always been sharing here with us, the House of Reawakening Minds, remember to go and review the video so that you can take more refined notes. And we will be sharing some of this information in printed form with those who come to share with us in the post that Dr. Naila will be posting in the near future.
Today.
And that will be listed. That will be listed as for the people.
Up close and personal 2.
Yes, number 2. All right. So those of you who make the trek to come to the up and personal with us too,
on the 30th.
This will be made available for those who want to purchase it just for printing costs. No more than printing costs. So here we go. Pay attention. Take notes. Number 1, man is a social being, fond of the company of his fellows, and always disposed to live with others. It is thus that families, tribes, and nations are formed. Men render to and receive mutual benefits and assistance from each other. But in such societies, there must constantly arise causes of difference among the several members. And these must be adjusted or settled either by the parties themselves or by some power which is superior to them. Their rights must also be regulated so that the parties may know to what each one is entitled. This is done by an actual or presumed agreement of all the members of the society, the state, or the nation, by the establishment of certain rules which require the name of laws. The knowledge of these laws, or the science by which they are understood, overstood, understood, comprehended, is called jurisprudence. 2, the first step to understand the science is therefore to know exactly the nature of the laws and to form of them a definite and precise idea. By science is understood a connection of truths founded on evident principles or on demonstrations. A collection of truths of the same kind arranged in a methodical order for the purpose of making them more easily comprehended and understood. 3, in its most extensive sense, the word law signifies rule of action. It is a rule which all beings, whether animate or inanimate, reasonable or not, must observe. Thus we say the laws of motion, the laws of gravitation, the laws of mechanics, as we say natural laws, political or criminal laws. In this sense, all beings have their laws. The material world have their laws. Animals and man each have their laws. The knowledge of all these laws belong to philosophy, which is the immensity, embraces all the knowledge which man acquire by the use of his reason. More circumscribed in its object, jurisprudence regulates only human actions. 4. Law, in this view, then, is the rule of human actions. That is, of those actions which are the result of the free exercise of intelligence and of will. Law is called a rule of action by a metaphor borrowed from mechanics. A rule, in its proper sense, is the instrument by which or by means of which we draw from one point to another the shortest line possible, which is called a straight line. The rule is used in comparison to the arts in order to judge whether a line is straight, as it is used in law to judge whether an action is just or unjust. An action is just or right when it conforms to the rule, which is the law. It is unjust when it differs from the line or the rule. Then it is not right. And so it is of our will or intention. 5. Justice has been variously defined, and it is the constant and perpetual disposition to render to every man his due. Or, perhaps more correctly, it is a conformity of our actions and wills to the law. 6. Justice is an interior or exterior. First is the conformity of our will, and the last of our actions to the law. The union of both makes perfect justice. The last is alone the subject of human jurisprudence. Interior justice is the object of morality. 7. In the most extensive sense of the word, justice differs but little from virtue, for it includes within itself the whole circle of virtues. Yet the common distinction between them is this: that which positively and in itself is called virtue, when considered relatively with respect to others, has the name of justice. But justice, being in itself a part of virtue, is confined to things simply good or evil, and consists in a man taking such proportion of them as he ought. 8. To make a law, there must be a superior who has authority to make it, as an inferior who is bound by it. To complete the definition of law, we must say that it is a rule prescribed by a lawful superior. God, as a principle, is the first great superior. Peace and order in society would not be guaranteed by the principles of human legislation if those principles were not protected by the salutary influence of true religion. Now, of course, that's distinguished from dogma. And human laws would be insufficient to regulate the conduct of man if their action was not supported, directed, and supplied by religion and morality, and religion would of themselves be powerless to ensure the peace of society without the aid of the civil law. Many moral obligations exist which are not enforced by the civil law, and these are left to the operations of conscience, and such, for example, as gratitude and benevolence. 9. The law of nature or natural law is that which God, the sovereign of the universe, has prescribed to all men, not by any formal promulgation, but by the dictate of right reason alone. It is ascertained by a just consideration of the agreeableness of disagreeableness or disagreeableness of human actions to the nature of man, and it comprehends all the duties we owe either to the supreme being, emphasized, to ourselves, emphasized, or to our neighbors, as reverence to God's self-defense, temperance, honor to our parents, benevolence to all, a strict adherence to our engagements, gratitude, and the like. By natural law is also understood the system of collection of those laws arranged together in a methodical order. And the law of nature is superior in obligation to any other. It is binding in all countries and at all times. And no human laws are valid if opposed to this, and all which are binding derive their authority either directly or indirectly from it. 10. The law of nations is a system of rules deducible by human reason from the immutable principles of natural justice and established by universal consent among the civilized nations of the earth in order to decide all disputes and to ensure the observance of good faith and justice in the intercourse which must frequently occur between them, or it depends upon mutual compacts, treaties, leagues, and agreements between separate, free, and independent communities. The law of nations, jus gentium, has of late years been called international law. So when you hear international law, keep in mind the laws of nations, etc. They are conjoined. So nations with regard to each other are considered as individuals, and the law of nations is to regulate the differences which may exist between them in their national capacity. And of course, that would be in what is known as diversity of citizenship or diversity of nationality, i.e., those would be consular venues, and such courts would be largely consular in their nature. Now, they are in a state of nature and must be considered as so many free and independent persons living in that state, and therefore the rules of natural law are to be applied to them. International law is generally divided into two branches: the natural law of nations, consisting of rules of justice applicable to the conduct of states; the positive law of nations, which consists of the voluntary law of nations, derived from the presumed consent of nations, arising out of their general usage; the conventional law of nations, derived from the express consent of the nations as individuals and evidenced in treaties and other international contracts or compacts; the customary law of nations, which is a tacit consent to certain rules which have been observed by them. The law of nations has been divided by writers into necessary or voluntary, or in absolute and arbitrary, by others into primary and secondary, which later has been subdivided into customary and conventional. Another division is made into natural and positive. The various source and evidence of the law of nations are the following: the rules of conduct deducible by reason from the nature of society existing among independent states, which ought to be observed among nations; The adjudications of international tribunals such as prize courts and boards of arbitration. Text writers of authority. Ordinance or laws of particular states prescribing rules of conduct of their commissioned cruisers and prize tribunals. The history of wars, negotiations, treaties of peace, and other matters relating to the intercourse of nations. Treaties of peace, alliance, and commerce declaring, modifying, and defining the pre-existing international law. That's 11. All right. That should be sufficient at this point. So I want to put you in the state of mind that the fundamental principles of law are based actually in common divine reasoning. If a law or an ens legis execution, and an ens legis is where you have people who claim to be in legislative government or sometimes wrongfully executing from the bench, where you see people who claim to be judges are making up rules that are contrary to the established law. Those are frauds, etc. And any